The third topic now is in the name of Deputy Martin Kenny, who has 4 minutes.
Thank you, Lasker Hirlock. Minister, I'm raising today with you the issue of out-of-hours services for mental health services in the North West, and particularly in Sligo. I know you're going to read a response to me and tell me that there are out-of-hours services in place and that there are junior doctors on call and that there's a junior doctor on backup call. However, the experience of people in the region, particularly in the Sligo-Leitrim region, is very different to that. And I'll give you an example of a constituent of mine who contacted me about his son, who is a person who is a mental health service user for a considerable period of time, a young man who suffered from a situation in his youth where he was abused, and as a consequence of that has mental health episodes for many, many years. And this situation has meant that he has been in and out of hospital on numerous occasions. His family was a great support to him and was working with them and trying to help him, but they were advised by the mental health service to back a little bit, that it wasn't good, and that the mental health service would put a team around him to help him, and that there would be a social worker put in place, which there was put in place, and that the primary care unit in his nearest town would also come into play and would help with looking after him in respect of that. Now, the situation is, first of all, that the social worker retired and wasn't replaced, and nothing left. And then the primary care unit, which was supposed to provide mental health services, is very ad hoc, and on numerous occasions he's phoned that primary care centre to get nobody there, and not even to get a phone call back. On a couple of occasions, his father has helped him and has talked to him about it and has went with him to the mental health services, and they have assured them that if ever he sees a meltdown coming on, because this person, when a meltdown happens, he's inclined to self-harm, he wrecks his whole house, he slashes out at everybody around him, he's a danger to himself and to others. And when that happens, they told him, come to us and the door will be open and we'll take you in and we'll look after you. And when he done that, and he arrived less than a week ago in St Columba's, out of hours, there was nobody there, he sat for an hour and a half, in fact he sat for 2.5 hours before he seen a junior consultant, who talked to him for about a half an hour and then told him he was okay to go home. So he felt let down by the service and went home equally as distressed as he was when he came. And a couple of days later, he actually phoned the Gardaí and said, please come and take me away or I'm going to do something terrible. And the Gardaí had to come and bring him back into the services. Now, that is a situation. He's one. There are numerous others, and this is also a situation sometimes with young adolescents and children that are in similar situations, and they find that there's huge holes in the service. So, Minister, the couple of issues that I want to raise with you today, first of all, in regard to the primary care situation and the fact that there's supposed to be a community service there for mental health patients, and that community service is in effect vacant when they go looking for it, and it's certainly vacant when they go looking for it in the Sligo-Leitrim region. That's one issue. And the second issue is in regard to the out-of-call services. When you arrive out of hours at St Columba's in Sligo and there is nobody there to help. And that is a reality for very, very many people. While there may be a junior consultant on call, that junior consultant is also on call in the hospital up the road, in the Sligo University Hospital, and may be dealing with people there and isn't able to come. And it's a question that I want you to ask and to find out about, is that when that happens, there's supposed to be a backup person on call, a backup junior registrar on call. How often has that person been called in? Because I've been told that they have never been called in. And people have waited for hours and hours and hours, and nobody to see them in very distressed and very disturbing situations. So, Minister, this is a serious, serious problem that needs to be dealt with, because if people are continually being turned away from the service, the next thing is we'll be talking about a tragedy and coming back and saying this person was turned away from the service and a tragedy happens, and we don't want that. I certainly don't want that, and you as the Minister are responsible, because you and your government are responsible for this situation, certainly don't want that.
Minister to respond.
Thank you, Deputy, for raising the issue of mental health services in your area. And as you know, Deputy, this is a priority, and this is an area that we have, and it's not just about money, and money won't solve the problems that are there, but there has been €105 million put into new development funding over the past 3 years, very specifically to extend mental health services to a 7-day week. That's our first priority. Sligo-Leitrim Mental Health Services provide a broad range of mental health services to the population of Sligo, Leitrim, South Donegal and West Cavan. Services provided encompass general adult psychiatry, psychiatry of old age, rehabilitation and recovery, mental health, of intellectual disability and child and adolescent mental health services. Services are provided directly in the community and in clinical or residential settings. Sligo Leitrim Mental Health Services operate an out-of-hours services in the form of 7-day mental health services based in the primary care centre in Ballymote. These services provide acute mental health treatment and support to individuals from the hours of 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. 7 days a week. Sligo Leitrim Mental Health Services also provide rehab and recovery services that include home-based treatment and assertive outreach models of care to clients known to the mental health services. These are also co-located within the Ballymote Primary Care Centre and operate from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. In addition, our emergency departments provide national coverage through a 24/7 service where members of the public receive acute mental health care and treatment. In Sligo, the emergency department of Sligo University Hospital provides this out-of-hours service. And I want to acknowledge the case the Deputy raised. While I'm not going to comment, obviously, on a specific case, and I know the Deputy isn't asking me, he's just used it as an illustration and will understand and appreciate that I can't respond. However, I will say and recognise and acknowledge that one of the greatest distresses that a parent can endure and a family member can endure is to be with somebody who has, as you describe in your words, a meltdown or an episode of psychosis and have to deal with that is very, very traumatic. The reality is the out-of-hours services at that hour, if it's 1 or 2 in the morning, the services that are available are based in the emergency department in the local hospital. You refer to somebody being turned away from the services. That's something that I'm not going to be ever able to comment or deal with, because that's a clinical decision made by a medical person, and I'm not there to judge the decision of a medical person or the decision that a qualified medical practitioner is going to make. But the challenge we have far into the future, and what I'm trying to do in this area, Deputy, which is to give you some idea of the thinking, is the whole area of online psychiatry, because we are never going to be able to staff a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day service in every county in Ireland and led by a consultant psychiatrist. It's never going to be possible. That's the reality. There's a real shortage of consultant psychiatrists worldwide. So we're going to look at how we provide that cover a bit better. I think the worst place for anybody to be having an episode of psychosis or a meltdown is to be inside an emergency department waiting 2 or 3 hours to be seen by a consultant psychiatrist. And what they do in other parts of the world across the globe is deal with this with online psychiatry, where you can be assessed by a consultant psychiatrist immediately with an online televisual conferencing. And they can be assessed, they can be diagnosed, they can be prescribed, and they can be admitted, if necessary, there and then, by wheeling up a cart, such as a blood pressure cart, turning on a screen and having consultant psychiatry, because we will never have a position where we have a consultant psychiatrist sitting in Sligo waiting for maybe that one presentation that might happen in a 24-hour period. I looked at the figures today for another part of the country and looked at the number of presentations for a city, a busy city area. 14 in the entire year happened in the out of hours. 14 in the entire year. So we have to look at how we do what we do, and that's the plan that I'm trying to develop, where we can have online psychiatry available, which is working across the world, which will cover a number of different sites and will provide immediate access to that key decision capacity. It will be done in an emergency department. You will have doctors and nurses there, but the consultant psychiatrist who is providing the clinical governance will be covering a number of different sites, online availability. That would be my hope for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I acknowledge that nobody expects there to be somebody there every minute of the day, but at the same time, the level of difficulty that people are coming across in these situations is very acute. And you mentioned Ballymote and that the out-of-hours services in Ballymote. Much of the time, the out-of-hours service in Ballymote is one member of staff alone in that building. And very often, they feel very vulnerable themselves. So, the out-of-hours service is far from a perfect service in respect of that. In addition to that, the person been turned away, which I know we can't comment on an individual case. Many of the reasons why the person is turned away is because the beds are all full. There are no beds. There is no space. There is no capacity. And I mean, that is a real situation, and there's certainly a real situation. I know there's a new mental health unit being built in Sligo, but certainly in Columbus and at the moment, that is the problem. And that is the reason why people are being turned away more than anything else. You mentioned about the recruitment of staff, and I just to ask you this simple question. Is the recruitment of staff for the mental health services also going through the National Recruitment Service? Because the amount of, you nod your head that it is, right? The amount of time that's taken is absolutely outrageous. When the mental health service, for instance, in Sligo Leitrim decide they need to recruit somebody and they advertise in that, first of all, there's only allowed to advertise one person per day in the service nationally, which is ridiculous for some peculiar reason that nobody seems to get a hold of. And then when they do, it takes maybe up to 6 months to recruit the person. I mean, it is diabolical that we're standing over this situation. There's no reason for it whatsoever, absolutely none, other than somebody somewhere deciding that we're going to draw up a set of rules and then everybody has to live by rules, as if that's the reality of life. It's not the reality of life. Finally, Minister, the concept you put out there that there's going to be some kind of an online consultation that a person can do, you know, when will that happen? If you're saying that's the answer you're putting forward, first of all, I'm not going to be sceptical. I'll embrace it. I'll say, right, let's see it. But when can that happen? Because if you're saying that that can happen, surely there should be no reason that we have to wait a year, 2 years, 5 years for somebody to write a report and consultants to do reports on it or something. That should happen immediately. At least tell us that there's going to be a pilot of that happening and put that pilot into the Sligo Leitrim area. Can you do that and can give you that commitment today? Thank you.
Minister to respond.
Okay, can I first of all just acknowledge the Deputy's bona fides in this area, because I've had many conversations with the said Deputy on the subject of mental health, and I just want to acknowledge that from the outset. And I've always found you to be very responsive and responsible in your approach and not looking in a narrow view but wanting to serve the greater good, so I want to acknowledge that. But secondly, just answer your questions, I share some of the same frustrations as you do about the National Recruitment Service and trying to see how it works. I recently invited in all the executive clinical directors in the areas of mental health in Linton, Brett of the country, including your own CHO area, and I wrote to them afterwards and I asked them to give me examples of the difficulties they were having with recruitment and their experiences of the current recruitment process within the HSE. On foot of getting all of those, which I've only received in the last week or 10 days, I've received all of their responses to Linton, Brett of the country. I'm currently going through them. I have looked to meet with the National Recruitment Service myself to go out and visit with them and see, because oftentimes we pass on the blame in kind of a circular way, but you have to go along and follow the chain each way. So I want to go myself and hear their side of it, National Recruitment Service. But I am aware of the frustrations being expressed by people, as you are, Deputy, as well, particularly in the area of mental health. And I am following that chain to see can I address some of the blockages and difficulties and challenges in the area of recruitment. You asked a very specific question about the pilot, and I thank you for your embrace of it, because I think we have to embrace change. It's easy to be sceptical and knock everything, but if we always do what we always did, we're going to get the same responses we've always had, and that's not good enough as far as I'm concerned. I have brought in all the people, the Linton, Brett of the country, into the National Concert Arena there recently, our National Conference Centre, and explained to them the whole concept of online. The clinical people believe in it, and they accept that that is the way forward, and that is a better way of delivering mental health care, or will at least complement the existing mental health care, not a better way, but complement the existing, and they're up for it. So we are running a number of pilots. The Linton, Brett of the country, the HSE are rolling them out as we speak in the whole area of delivering mental health care online, both psychology and psychiatry, and that is the way we will address the gaps that are in the system, rather than a psychiatrist travelling in a car 3 hours over and back return journey to be somewhere else. Those 3 hours could be done online. So
we're moving on to the next.
I'll have to come back to where they are at the location.
Deputy Eugene Murphy is 4 minutes.